Good evening. Back again. It's the first week of December and it's night time. Always kind of nice to reminisce and tell stories on a night like this. And getting to be that time of year where we talk about family, I thought I might talk about something that represents that. And that would be this pen. So, let's get started. So, we're not going to be looking at this. We are going to be looking at this. This is my Mont Blanc Meisterstück 146 fountain pen. Now, it's a 146 because that's what I was told by the Frenchman who looked down his glasses at me and told me it is pas 146, as I had said, mais celui être 146. And then he went on to explain that 1 stands for Meisterstück, the 4 stands for the filling system, and the 6 is for the 6mm nib. Now, there are a lot of videos that go into great detail about the history of Mont Blanc and the founding of the company and the pens themselves, and I'm going to kind of try to, I'll give a description of the pen as well, but I'm going to leave those things to those other people who know better. I want to tell a story about my pen. And the reason why is because one of the things that I see in almost every video that I've ever seen about a Mont Blanc pen is it worth it? Is this pen worth the amount of money that it takes to get into it? And well, I don't know. I only have what I think about my Meisterstück 146. Now, my father was living in Europe, and my mother was traveling back and forth to go and spend time with him. And after she had spent a shopping trip in London, she wanted to get her VAT tax, so she bought this pen for me. And when she came home about this time of year after Thanksgiving, she pulled it out of her purse. She had tossed the box and the information that came with the pen originally away and put it in her purse because she didn't want to pay any fees on the pen when she went through customs. I think that this pen is well out of danger in the statute of limitations. So I think that we are safe to say that, yes, she smuggled in my gift pen. And she handed it to me and said that this was like a pre-Christmas, pre-high school graduation, pre-birthday pen. And so in one fell swoop, she had taken care of all of my gifts for the next 8 months and handed me this pen. And this pen, I got this pen brand new in the early 80s, 1980s. And I have, at times, been very abusive to it. But it is identifiable as a 1980s pen by a couple of things. One is that the serial number is located on the side, and directly opposite the clip is W-Germany. Now, I know you can't see that, but that is stamped on the back. Whereas the newer pens, the serial number is on the side, and then opposite the serial number just says Germany instead of West Germany on the back. Pen's also a little longer than the original celluloid pens, which were made in the 50s, and a little shorter than the modern pens made today. It, of course, is gold trimmed, has the rings and blah, blah, blah. Like I said, you can go to other videos and see all that, but this pen is also very identifiable as an 80s era pen by the window that it has for the ink. The ink window, let me get this little pen out here. You can see the ink window is kind of a gray. Does it work better if I do it that way? And you can see there we go. It's sort of a gray color. It's kind of a Payne's gray. And it, unlike the celluloid pens, which are a little yellowish, and the new pens, which have like slotted clear, this one is just gray. Another thing that is a tip-off to the vintage of this pen is that the flare here on the grip section is a kind of a matte. It's not really shiny. And lastly, the thing that tips this pen off is the ebonite feed. This is called a bridged ebonite feed on this pen. And it, of course, is the number 6 two-tone gold 14 karat nib. This is a extra fine nib on this pen. And so we're going to ink up this pen, and I thought I would tell you a little bit more about it. Now, the ink I'm going to put into it is going to be this Mont Blanc Mystery Black, which it's not my favorite ink, but I put this ink in this pen just because I find it a little humorous. And in fact, this is the only pen I use this ink with. So the thing that attracted me to this ink originally was the box. I love this box that has the little pull tab on it and the bottle. The original bottles weren't like this. This is a newer bottle. This is the new bottle design. It still has the shoe shape, but the cap is different. It's now this plastic cap. The original caps were kind of like a hard rubber cap, and the bottle shape has changed too. It's used to be kind of round on the back, and the label is able to sit flat. The original bottles, when they were curved, the label was also curved on the back, and it would never quite lay flat on the bottle. And that used to really bug me, to the point where I actually took an X-Acto knife once and cut slits in it so I could lay it flat. And so even though this is not like the original bottle, I kind of like it better because the label will lay flat. And one of the funny things is that the Germans and all of their precision oriented manufacturing, one of the things that gets pointed out from time to time is that the finials are never in the same place. They're not lined up with the clip on the cap, and they are also all different. If you look at different pens, the cap will be turned, and there's a screw that holds the cap on, that holds the clip and the cap on. You could probably tweak it a little bit, but it just kind of shows you that the Germans can still let their hair down and party like it's 1999 with their vintage styled cigar-shaped fountain pens. Unfortunately, I do not share that same aesthetic, at least with the labels on their old bottles, because I had to trim the label to make it sit flat on the glass. So let's fill this up, and I'll talk a little bit about the pen. Now again, this is my old Mont Blanc pen. I've had this pen for gadzooks 40 years. I should probably agitate this ink just a moment, since one of the things I like about these caps is the way they fit on. It's got a nice heft to it, the material that it's made out of, and it has this nice bezel, and it's kind of a fun little addition that I'm able to enjoy the cap on my pen. So let's fill this one up. We're going to take the cap off. Now, sometimes I say I use a tissue. This isn't a tissue. This is like a napkin, like a restaurant-style napkin, where they don't have much lint. I would never actually use Kleenex on my fountain pen because the lint will get into the nib and into the feed of the pen and work its way up to the nib and cause great consternation, much gnashing and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now, one of the things I like about this bottle is I can tilt it and capture ink on that horn so that I can fill my pen. Now, one of the things about this pen is no matter how I fill it, no matter what techniques I use, there almost always is a little air bubble. And as you can see, the window completely disappears when the pen has ink in it. Always cap your ink. The only way I ever got a complete fill on this pen, unfortunately, resulted in the wasting of a lot of my ink to get the bubble out. So I never really bother with trying to completely get that bubble out of this pen. put our ink away real quick. And voila. Now again, I like to use lint-free cloths because they don't gum up the works in my pen. And we will get a book out here. Let's get a book out here. We're going to do some drawing. Oh, it's kind of a nice picture. There we go. So first, well, let's do something else first before we do anything else. We may as well add this pen to this list. We're not doing any tests with this pen, but still kind of fun to keep track of the black inks, right? So this is a Mont Blanc Meisterstück fountain pen. This is the 146. I'm going to run this in fast motion so as to not create too much pain with waiting for me to write. And the ink, of course, is the Mystery Black by Mont Blanc. And let's make some lines here. And we will get on with it. As you can see, it's a rather dry ink in a rather dry pen. We'll let that dry for a second or two, and we will see how long it takes to dry. It's always going to remain a little wetter on this Clairefontaine paper. Being coated paper, it doesn't dry very quickly. And let's try adding some water, a little bit of water to this ink. This is not a water-fast ink by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm going to just dab my brush on here, and as you can see, the ink immediately starts to pick up and smudge and smear and move around, and we can also see that it's starting to break up into more component colors. This Mystery Black isn't really like a blue black. It's more of a red or a purplish black, and the material that this Mont Blanc pen is made out of, the precious resin, is actually not black either. If I take this pen light and I stick it in the cap and turn off the light, you can see that mysterious lava-colored glow down there with this slightly blue-colored LED. Makes you can see that the resin that this pen is made out of is actually kind of a deep red, and the Mystery Black ink also has a lot of those sort of muted red tones in it as well. I wonder if that might be the mystery. And that's one of the reasons why I like pairing this pen with this ink. I just think it's kind of funny. So let's get out that book again. We're going to do some drawing here. As I was saying, my mother came back from London because my father was working in Europe, so she gave me this pen, and I immediately popped it into my vinyl pocket protector that I had, and I of course wore my pocket protector on the inside pocket of my jacket to be more stealthy, because after all, I was already designated a band geek. The last thing I needed to be was a nerd band geek. So I'm going to put this into fast motion and continue to just tell my tale. And I got my pen, and of course I put it in my pocket protector, and I went to school the very next day and used my brand new fountain pen at school. I took my finals with this fountain pen at school, and I had used fountain pens at school before, so it wasn't anything unusual for kids to look at me that I was using a fountain pen, since I had a couple of Steely's gold-plated steel nib pens and a mechanical pencil that I used to keep in my pocket protector with this pen. And one of the things that I used to enjoy doing was going out on the fishing boat out of Paradise Cove. Now, Paradise Cove had 2 fishing boats. There were actually 3, but there were 2 regular boats that would service the pier to take people out on sport fishing cruises. One of them was the Speed Twin, the other one was the Gentleman. And I was all about the Gentleman. It was a classic looking fishing boat, and everyone liked the Speed Twin. It was a catamaran style boat, and it was much more modern. It had a nice interior area where you could sit more than like 3 people, and it had vending machines on board, unlike the Gentleman, which was pretty much you were going to be sitting on the rail or standing the whole time that we would be out. But sometimes I would enjoy taking my fountain pen and my pad of paper, and while I was waiting for a strike, I'd sit there and I would draw or doodle, or sometimes I would journal or just write things. And I'm fortunate that I never dropped my pen into the water and had it roll out down into the briny deep. But taking the pen in my tackle box was never a very kind thing to it. It got kind of beat up. And then when I graduated high school and went to college, I continued to use this pen in college and use it for taking notes at school. In fact, I would put it in my pencil box and put the pencil box in the thermos slot on my backpack, and I would bungee cord my backpack to the sissy bar of my motorcycle and ride my bike off to school. And the pen got bounced around quite a bit, and sometimes it would protest by blotting ink on me, but for the most part it was a very well behaved pen. And how did it write new out of the box? I really couldn't tell you. The other pens that I had were really old, were either steel nib pens, or the one good pen that I did have was a gold Flex Omas nib that was on a generic piston filler body, and I don't even know what the feed was. It was an ebonite feed, but I don't know who manufactured it. And so it tended to blot, and I didn't use that pen much. But when I got this Mont Blanc, I really started to like it. It became my regular use pen. I had my gold-plated steel-nibbed aluminum fountain pen that used international cartridges, but it kind of, that pen, which had been my main pen, it kind of took a back seat to this one because I liked this pen so much more. And I used it through my first year of college, and I was working in college, and I decided to get my taxes done by a tax guy. I didn't want to do them myself, so it was my first time ever filing income taxes, and an adult. I was 18 years old, and I went to the tax man, and I noticed that out of the coat pocket, out of his breast pocket, poked the top of Mont Blanc. And I said, "Oh, I have a Mont Blanc fountain pen." And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yes. I got it as a graduation gift from my mother." And he said, "You are quite the fortunate fellow to have such a fine writing instrument at such a young age. I hope that you are taking good care of it." And as I left his office after signing my taxes, I had to stop and think, I knew that a lot of people had Mont Blanc pens. I saw the men in town with their pens poking out of their pockets, and this made me think maybe I needed to look into this a little bit more. And so I went to a tobacco shop where they sold gentlemen's refinements like Zippo lighters and hand-carved wooden pipes and pen knives and such. And one of the things they had were pens. And when I went to look at the pens, I noticed that the Mont Blanc pens not only were not in the front counter, but instead in the back counter in a velvet green pen case. They also had no price tags on them. So that was a bit of a clue. And of course, this was the dawning of time when there was no internet. In fact, Al Gore wasn't even able to invent the internet because he hadn't even been elected as vice president yet. And so I had no way to know what this pen really was until I went to the tobacco and looked at the pens and saw the price. And when I realized that what a status pen this actually was, I felt very self-conscious. I felt embarrassed for having used it in such a Nimrod fashion for the past 2 years of my life, and I was embarrassed. But this pen has been used by me for doing many things I've written. After that day, I took it and I put it in my desk, and it lived in the desk drawer of my apartment, where I used it for corresponding with letters to my grandparents and writing cards and signing checks and special documents. I would use this, but this pen has always remained inked. This pen has always remained in use, and it in fact is the only pen that I've had since that time when I was young. It has never let me down. It's never stopped working. It never broke. I never had to have it repaired. And it's full of little nicks and dings and chips and all sorts of imperfections now. But I look at those imperfections as being sort of a reflection of my life on the barrel of this pen. And I had a friend who saw my pen one day when we were out, and he has a couple of Mont Blancs as well. And he told me, your pen would be worth more if you had taken better care of it. And I thought about that as I was driving home. And I thought, well, when I got this pen, it really had no worth at all because it was given to me as a gift. I didn't know it. And today, with all the dings and scratches, it's become priceless to me. And as I think about that, with all of the pens that my mother could have bought for me, Pelicans or Conklins like my father, she bought me this pen. And when I think about a pen that I'll pass on to my son, the pen that I used to write my last letters to my grandparents, the pen I used to sign his birth certificate, the pen I used to sign my first income tax forms with, when I think of everything that I've done with this pen, and I think about all the other pens it could have been, for that same token, I have to think to myself, I'm glad that it was a Mont Blanc. And is this pen worth it? Well, for me, certainly it was. And I'm very glad that this pen has been such a part of my life. And I hope someday that when my son holds this pen in his hand, he'll know, when he looks at Dad's old pen, he'll remember the stories that I've told him about how I have beaten this pen up and knocked it around. And the plating is still good. The barrel, though beaten, is a little war-worn, but there's no base metal showing through, and the pen has never let me down. It's always worked wonderfully. I have never used any harder inks in it. I've been better to this pen than I have been to my other pens, all of which have since passed into the great beyond. But the Mont Blanc Meisterstück 146, I can say yes, I'm glad that this pen represents my life. So, until next time, thanks for watching.